Good morning, everyone.
Good
Good
morning,
morning, Rabbi.
We're in Mishna Pesachim, Parakir, chapter 10, Gimel, Mishna 3. Heviu lafanav metabel chazeres. They bring in front of him, which means they bring in front of him vegetables, which he will dip the lettuce. Until he reaches the breaking or the eating of the bread. This is talking about the part of this that we call karpas. We take a vegetable and we dip. Our prevalent is to dip it into salt water. But salt water is not what the halacha says you have to use. The practice of karpas essentially is take a vegetable and dip it. Practice in times of the Mishna. If I understand correctly, dip. But what the way at this point of the Seder, we start with dipping vegetables. Now, and that's when they brought in front of him. Really means they bring in front of him vegetables for dipping. The Mishnah says, then the Mishnah uses as an example of dipping chazeres. Chazeres means lettuce. That's what chazeres is, lettuce. So in the case of the Mishnah, what are you using for karpas? What are you using for that first part of the Seder? When you dip a vegetable, you're using lettuce. Now, lettuce is also what you use for maror. There are 5 types of maror, 5 types of bitter herbs, if we want to call them, that you can use for the mitzvah of maror. We had it a while ago. The most preferable is chazeres, is lettuce. So here, the Mishnah is using chazeres as an example for karpas for a very specific reason. But the commentaries point out that really, for karpas, you shouldn't use lettuce if you're going to be using lettuce for maror. But at the end of the day, if you do, it works. You can still fulfill what karpas is meant to do. Now, what is the purpose of karpas? What is the purpose of starting the meal with dipping the vegetable? And the answer is that actually, vegetables are not usually eaten before the meal. That's not how you usually start the meal, at least in times of the Mishnah. So it was very curious what was being done. And the point was to arouse the curiosity of the children. The children should see we're doing something different. We're starting the meal dipping vegetables, which is not typically what we do. That's not how you typically start the meal. Why are we starting it in this way? And my understanding is that this way of starting it isn't just like randomly different. It would give a sense of some kind of, sense of unique specialty to this meal. And the kids are asking, what's going on? Why are we doing this? And the purpose of that is to arouse curiosity, because the best way that we can fulfill the mitzvah of telling our children the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the story of Exodus from Egypt, is in a form of question and answer. We're trying to get them to start asking, trying to arouse curiosity. And the first thing that we do is dipping at the beginning of the meal, which is something not usually done, to arouse the curiosity. And it's done with a vegetable, and you dip it into another food. Again, the prevalent custom by us is to use salt water. Now, the Mishnah continues, so they bring in front of vegetables for dip. Chazeres, he dips the lettuce, or he eats the lettuce, until they reach the breaking of the bread. The breaking of the bread is just another way of saying eating bread. What bread are we talking about? Matzah. So the Mishnah is saying that you can eat the lettuce until you reach eating the bread, which means not that you keep eating lettuce the whole time, but it means that you're going to eat lettuce, not eat lettuce again meaning you'll eat lettuce until the eating of the bread, but not before. Meaning to say that in the order of the Seder, right, we're going to be eating matzah, we'll be eating maror. Which comes first? The answer is the matzah comes first. That's what it means. What it is, you eat the lettuce, which again, you will be using again for maror, or in case you are, because that's the preferred preferred vegetable to use for maror. So you're going to eat the chazeres, you're going to eat the lettuce until you come to hamotzi, meaning lettuce is eaten, and it's eaten once, and then you have hamotzi. You're not going to go and eat the lettuce a second time before hamotzi, because you don't do mar before matzah, you do matzah before mar. Next, the Mishnah says, Heviu lefanav, then they bring in front of him matzah v'chazeres, then they bring before him matzah v'chazeres, again lettuce, barar, v'chareis, and the chareises, ushnei tabshilin, and 2 cooked foods. Okay, so the next part, this is what we would call the Seder plate, in the sense that you're bringing matzah, you're bringing before the head of the household what is going to be needed for eating at the Seder. You're going to have matzah, you're going to have marar, and you're going to have chareises. What is chareises? So according to the way the Tanura explains chareises is a dish made from nuts, figs, apples. Apple seems to be a very important part of it, and other fruits that are crushed and mixed with fruit vinegar. Okay. Thin strips of ginger and cinnamon resembling straw, which Jews had to gather in Egypt, placed on top. Its thick texture similar to the clay with which the Jews worked, meaning that's what they made the bricks from. So that's what chareises is about. That's what chareises is about. That's what it is. So you're bringing now in front of the head of the household, one leading the Seder, the matzah, the mar, the chareises, and 2 foods, 2 cooked foods. The 2 cooked foods are what we call the zeroah, the roasted meat, and the baits of the egg. These 2 foods are brought because one is to remind us of the Karban Pesach, the Pesach sacrifice meat that, as the Mishnah is going to say, would have been brought in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, and the egg represents the Chagiga sacrifice. Now, Chagiga sacrifice in this context refers to what we learned previously, that if your Karban Pesach is too small to be able to fill up on it and perform the mitzvah of Karban Pesach on it, they would bring, again, Erev Pesach, they would offer a Karban Chagiga, a shlamim offering, a meal, what's called a peace offering, a shlamim offering, that they would then eat the meat at the Seder, so that would be the meat that would fill them, and then they would eat the Karban Pesach, because the Karban Pesach has to be eaten, in a state of satisfaction, a state of being full. So you're bringing the 2 foods being brought are the 2 foods that commemorate the Karban Pesach and the Karban Chagiga. Then the Mishnah says, when the chareis that we mentioned before, the Mishnah says, we bring it even though it's not a mitzvah. We mean it's not a mitzvah. It means, according to this opinion, what is the purpose of this chareises? The purpose of the chareises is that this lettuce can have in it certain, call it they describe it here as the sap of lettuce contains a dangerous element. Some kind of liquid comes out of the lettuce. It could be dangerous, and it's neutralized by dipping the lettuce in the chareises. So the first opinion says it's not a mitzvah means the only reason we have chareises is to make sure we don't get hurt from the mar. Now they also add here from the Taisus Yontif, very interesting. We eat lettuce all year round, and sometimes it's karpas at the Seder without dipping it into chareises. Right? Before we talked about using lettuce for karpas. You're not dipping it into chareises. You're not dipping it, and it seems it's the chareises that has the ability to neutralize this sap, this whatever it is in the lettuce. Okay, it says it's called a sap. It can be dangerous. We eat lettuce all year round, and sometimes without dipping it into chareises because it is not usually harmful. Rabbis required the lettuce of mara be dipped into chareises so that performing the mitzvah that involves any risk at all. Extra precautionary measure. Make sure nothing goes wrong. Making sure that nothing goes wrong with the mitzvah. And therefore, that's why, according to this opinion, by the Marer specifically, is when we're concerned to make sure that this kind of dangerous part of the lettuce is going to be neutralized in the chareises. Again, not for any, there's no point of it on its own. It's just there to protect us from what could possibly be harmful in the Marer. The son of Tzaddik said, mitzvah, no. Chareises is a mitzvah. There is a positive reason. There is a reason for chareises itself. Yes, we dip the mar into the chareises, but there is a specific purpose for chareises also. And they explain here from the Baratanura, the apple and the chareises remind us of apple trees under which the Jewish women in Egypt gave birth without pain. And the thick texture of the chareises recalls the clay with which the Jews work. Meaning there is something specific. There's a reason why we have charesis itself, the reason why we want to partake of charesis itself. And that is because of the fact that the charesis reminds us of two things. Number one is apple in the charesis. And the Gemara tells us that women miraculously give birth to, when there's a decree against for killing all the Jewish baby boys, the Medrash says we used to go out to these apple orchards and secretly give birth there. And they would leave the children there, and the children would survive miraculously. So to remember that, and the thickness of the mixture reminds us of the clay used for the bricks. So there are reasons for having the charesis itself. Rebbe Lezer okay, Uva Mikdash, in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, at this point of time, after the dipping of the vegetable, and after going through the Haggadah, which we haven't even discussed yet. So we said before, they bring the matzah and the maror and the charesis and the two cooked foods. The times of the Mikdash, the Beis Hamikdash, when we had the Korban Pesach, instead of the two cooked foods, they brought the Korban Pesach and the Korban Chagiga. So when we had the Beis Hamikdash, they brought the matzah and the Korban Chagiga. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.